This was Donald Trump's maiden outing before the UN's most prestigious gathering. And what he served up basically was pure red meat for his core supporters, most of whom absolutely revile multilateral institutions such as the UN. It was a dark and at times even chilling speech, Stuart, with echoes, in fact, of his talk, you might remember, of American carnage during his inaugural address. It was about as far a cry as possible from, say, Barack Obama's inaugural address before the UN back in 2009, when he pledged to commit America to global institutions, international cooperation, collective action, but also significantly, it was a pretty far cry from the man who spoke just before him, a couple of speakers before him, the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, who basically appealed to the world for statesmanship in troubled times and urged, he said, this is not a time to sleepwalk into war. Donald Trump basically used the word sovereignty 21 times in his speech. And when he says sovereignty, he's essentially giving a prescription or an order to other nations to do what he's done with America, that America first credo. He's saying to the rest of the world, what you guys should do is do what we're doing. Put your own interests first. Fight your own corners. It's diametrically opposed to the credo that we heard earlier from past presidents, notably Barack Obama. What's interesting is what he didn't say as well. While he was lambasting Iran as a rogue regime, threatening to totally destroy North Korea, he was only full of praise for Saudi Arabia, a regime which is right now with U.S. cooperation, bombing basically Yemen and leading a very, very, very bloody and awful campaign against that country. And also nothing about Myanmar, where we've seen a mounting refugee crisis, now almost at 500,000 who fled to neighboring Bangladesh. No mention there, and no mention Emmanuel Macron's big issue, climate change, nothing, and nothing about individual rights. So the speech was notably absent in a lot of stuff. This is a speech that a lot of authoritarian leaders might embrace because it basically says you can do what you want, other countries should not intervene in your affairs.
Macron did set a very different tone, didn't he, in his speech?
As different as you can get. They may have well as written the speech on different planets. Macron was a very, very staunch defense of what we were just talking about, multilateralism. He was basically saying at a time of rising discordant voices in the world, the only approach is really a collective approach, a multilateral approach. And to do anything else is basically to give in to what he called the law of the strongest. He was withering, with respect to North Korea, he basically as much as said, there is no military solution. You need to hold open the door to dialogue. As nefarious as he may think North Korea's leader is and its actions have been, he says you must and France will remain open to some diplomatic solution, to dialogue. And on Iran as well, he said it's one thing to denounce the Iran deal, but if you're not offering anything in its stead, it would be an absolutely grave error and very irresponsible to give it up. And he devoted a lot of the speech to climate change, an issue which, as we just said, Donald Trump did not even mention, other than a brief aside at the very opening of his address to express sympathy for the victims of the recent Irma hurricane.
And briefly, Doug, then later today, looking ahead, Iran's leader set to be very visible there.
Absolutely. Iran might get finally a chance to react. Hassan Rouhani is going to be giving his big speech at the U.S., stepping up to the UN podium. But notably, he's going to be giving a press conference to selected invited reporters in which he's expected, perhaps, I expect he will be very heavily questioned about what he thinks of Donald Trump's, like I said, extremely bellicose rhetoric, accusing Iran of exporting chaos and terrorism around the world, and threatening to tear up that 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which was really the product of a collective concert of nations and painstakingly put together. A deal which we just said Emmanuel Macron thinks would be a grave error to step out of. And some people say that if Donald Trump were to exit from that deal, Stuart, it could actually feed right into the hands of some of the hardliners in Iran, hardliners who are dead set against Rouhani's more moderate regime. And it could really skew the equation there for Iran and make things a lot harder. He himself has said on the eve of his own speech that he thinks America would pay quite a high price if it were to pull out of the Iran deal.